Court is now in session. What?
I didn't do anything wrong.
The officer's boot hit the door. Once, twice. Wood splintered on the third kick. Barbara Mitchell stood behind him, hands shaking. 4 years. 4 years since she'd last seen her daughter face to face. 4 years of doors slammed in her face, unanswered calls, neighbors whispering. The door gave way. The smell hit first. Unwashed dishes, mildew, something worse underneath. Then the sound, high-pitched, desperate, a child crying. The toddler sat in the corner of the living room. Maybe 2 years old, maybe younger, hard to tell through the dirt. Ribs visible through a torn shirt, sores on his arms, eyes too old for his face. Barbara's grandson, a child she didn't know existed until 3 hours ago. Before we go further, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what you're about to hear will make you look at your own family differently. This is about what happens when faith becomes prison, when love becomes control, and when a grandmother has to fight the law, the church, and her own daughter to save a child's life. This is the story of Barbara Mitchell, and how she lost her daughter to a cult and fought to get her grandson back. But finding that child wasn't the worst part. What Barbara discovered next, hidden on a compound 40 miles away, would reveal a conspiracy involving 33 children, a religious cult, and a daughter who'd been planning this for years. The second child. The one Barbara never knew existed. The one her daughter gave away when he was 8 months old. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to where this started. That Tuesday morning, March 25th, 2018, the day Barbara Mitchell decided to try one more time. March 25th, 2018, Bowling Green, Kentucky. Overcast sky, drizzle, typical spring morning. Barbara Mitchell, 52 years old, taught music at Lincoln Elementary School. 23 years in the same classroom, teaching 5th graders to read notes before they could read cursive. Annual salary, $54,800. Not rich, but stable. With Robert's warehouse supervisor income of $48,000, they'd built a comfortable middle-class life. That morning, Barbara couldn't focus on lesson plans. It was her daughter's birthday. Tara would be 29 years old today. 4 years. 4 years since they'd really talked. 4 years since Tara had looked her in the eye instead of crossing the street to avoid her. 4 years since Tara had joined Kyle's church, if you could call it that. The Church of the New Covenant. No building. No 500 and Onique 3 tax status. No website. Just 30 believers who met in basements and living rooms, moving locations every few months to avoid attention. Pastor Samuel Malone ran it. Preached separation from the world, from family, from anyone who didn't believe exactly what he believed. But it was Tara's birthday. Barbara had to try. Robert Mitchell, 54, warehouse supervisor at a paper distribution company, didn't want his wife to go. Barb, she won't answer. He said that morning over coffee. You'll just hurt yourself again. He was probably right. But Barbara couldn't stop thinking about the last time she'd really seen her daughter. Summer 2014. Tara was still in music school then. Vanderbilt University. Full scholarship. Junior year. Playing Chopin like she'd been born to it. Then she met Kyle Pashuk at some campus ministry event. By September, she dropped out. The house on Willow Bend Road looked worse than Barbara remembered. Paint peeling, gutters sagging, yard overgrown with weeds pushing through cracked concrete. The place had belonged to Kyle's grandmother, a sweet woman named Helen who'd kept it immaculate until she died in 2013. Kyle inherited it. Within a year, it looked abandoned. Barbara knocked at 11:47 a.m. Firm, insistent, no answer. She knocked again, harder, 5 times. 10 times. She could hear something inside. Movement, footsteps maybe, but nobody came to the door. 10 minutes of knocking. Nothing. A neighbor emerged from the house next door. Archibald Zemlin, 63, retired postal worker. Thin, weathered face. He spent most days tending his pigeon coop on the back lot. Had a clear view of the Pasha property from his rooftop perch. They left this morning. Zemlin called over. Both of them, around 9 o'clock. Barbara's chest tightened. Both. Kyle and your daughter. I saw them leave together. When do they usually come back? Zemlin shrugged. Saturdays? Sometimes not until evening. They go to services. All-day services. All day. Barbara looked at Robert. He touched her arm gently. Let's go, Barb. But then Barbara heard it. Faint. Behind the door. A baby crying. Barbara froze. Did you hear that? Robert heard it too. High-pitched. Unmistakable. Zemlin frowned. They don't have a baby. Listen, Barbara said sharply. They stood silent. 15 seconds. 20. Then again, crying. Weak, exhausted. The sound of a child who'd been crying a long time. Robert's face went pale. There's a child in there. Alone. Barbara already had her phone out. Fingers shaking as she dialed 911. Bowling Green police arrived at 12:13 p.m. 18 minutes. Felt like hours. Officer Derek Thompson, 31, 7 years on the force, stepped out of the cruiser. He'd seen welfare checks before. Usually nothing. Worried neighbors overreacting to normal family life. The crying behind the door told him this wasn't normal. He called for backup before attempting entry. At 12:29 p.m., with Barbara, Robert, and Zemlin standing back, Officer Thompson kicked in the door. The scene inside would later be described in official reports as consistent with severe neglect and endangerment. Spoiled food on kitchen counters. Garbage bags piled in the corner, some torn open. Bathroom unusable, toilet clogged, sink full of dirty dishes. The smell of human waste permeated the air. Temperature inside, 84 degrees. No air conditioning running. And in the back bedroom, sitting on a bare mattress with no sheets, a toddler in a soiled diaper. No food visible. No water. No toys. No adult supervision. The child's eyes were open but vacant. He didn't cry when strangers entered. Didn't react at all. Officer Thompson radioed immediately. Dispatch, we need EMS to 847 Willow Bend. Child welfare emergency. Toddler found alone. Signs of severe neglect. Barbara pushed past the officer. Maternal instinct overriding protocol. Mom, you need to step back, Thompson said firmly. He's my grandson. The words came out before Barbara could stop them. Officer Thompson stared at her. You knew about this child? No. Barbara's voice cracked. I had no idea he existed. Emergency medical services arrived at 12:34 p.m. Lead EMT Sarah Chen, 28, 6 years of experience, immediately noted critical signs. The child appeared approximately 2 years old based on dentition, but his size suggested severe malnutrition. Weight estimated at 19 pounds. Normal for a 12-month-old, dangerously low for a 2-year-old. He couldn't stand unassisted. Nonverbal. Wouldn't make eye contact. Visible injuries. Infected sores on both arms. Severe diaper rash. Head lice. Bruising on his legs consistent with frequent falls. Temperature. 99.8 degrees. Possible fever or dehydration. Shen radioed Tristar Greenview Regional Hospital. Inbound with pediatric patient, approximately 2 years old. Severe neglect case. ETA 12 minutes. Barbara and Robert followed in their car. The entire drive, Barbara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. At the hospital, They sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes. Other families came and went. A kid with a broken arm. An elderly woman with chest pains. Normal emergencies. This wasn't normal. Dr. Zena Kompanitz emerged at 1:18 p.m. 38 years old, pediatrician, 15 years in practice. She'd seen neglect cases before. This was worse. "Are you family?" Dr. Kompanitz asked. "I'm his grandmother," Barbara said. Dr. Kompanitz looked at her chart, frowned. "There's no record of this child in our system. No birth certificate on file with the state. No vaccination records. No previous medical care of any kind." "What's his name?" Barbara felt sick. "I don't know." The doctor's expression hardened. "I'm calling Child Protective Services. This child has been severely neglected for an extended period. Someone needs to answer for this." Tara Pashuk and Kyle Pashuk arrived at the hospital at 7:43 p.m., nearly 8 hours after their son was discovered alone and starving. Kyle Pashuk, 28 years old, 6'2", gaunt, intense eyes that never seemed to blink. Criminal record: assault with a deadly weapon in 2009, served 18 months in county jail. Found religion in prison, or claimed to. Started attending Pastor Malone's services 2 months after release in 2011. Tara Pashuk, 29 years old, but looked older. Hair pulled back in a severe bun. Long denim skirt, loose blouse. No makeup. The vibrant girl who'd played Rachmaninoff at her Vanderbilt audition was gone. Replaced by someone hollow. Someone afraid. Barbara saw them enter through the automatic doors. She stood abruptly. Tara saw her mother. Stopped. Her face went blank. Kyle put his hand on Tara's shoulder. Possessive, controlling. She didn't pull away. "Tara." Barbara took a step forward. Tara looked at Kyle. He nodded permission. "Mom." The word came out flat, emotionless. "You left him." Barbara's voice shook with rage and grief. "You left your baby alone for 8 hours." "We went to services," Tara said quietly. "For 8 hours, he was alone, crying, starving." Kyle spoke, his voice calm and condescending. "God provides for those who don't." Robert's voice cut through like a blade. "Don't you dare talk about God right now." Other people in the waiting room turned to stare. A security guard took a step closer. Kyle's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. CPS caseworker Michelle Torres arrived 10 minutes later. 42 years old, master's in social work, 12 years in Child Protective Services. She'd seen religious neglect cases before. They were always the hardest. Families who genuinely believed they were doing right by their children while causing immeasurable harm. "Mr. and Mrs. Pashuk," Torres said, flashing her identification. "I need to speak with you. Now." Conference room down the hall. Kyle and Tara followed without protest. Barbara watched them go, watched her daughter walk away like a prisoner following a guard. The conference lasted 90 minutes. When it ended, Torres emerged alone. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, "the child will remain in state custody pending investigation. Neither parent will have unsupervised access. I've recommended emergency shelter care." "What does that mean?" "Foster placement. Temporary. Until we determine if reunification is possible." Barbara felt her world tilt. Foster care. He doesn't know anyone. He's been through enough. "I understand. But this is protocol. Unless you'd like to file for emergency custody yourself." Barbara looked at Robert. He nodded. "Yes," Barbara said. "Whatever it takes." But getting custody wouldn't be simple, because what Barbara was about to discover would prove that this wasn't just about one neglected child. It was about an entire compound, 33 children, and a conspiracy that had been running for years. The next morning, Barbara called a lawyer. David Kowalski, 49 years old, family law attorney, 18 years in practice. His office was modest. Second floor of a converted Victorian house on Main Street in Bowling Green. Consultations, $250 an hour. Full custody battles, $15,000 to $50,000, depending on complexity. Barbara told him everything: the discovery, the hospital, the condition of the child. "I want custody of my grandson," Barbara said. "Full custody." David leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need to be very direct with you. What you're asking for is extremely difficult. You're requesting to remove a child from his biological parents without terminating their parental rights. Kentucky law sets a very high bar for that." He was alone, starving, covered in lice and sores. "I know, and CPS has him now, but courts prefer reunification. The state will require Kyle and Tara to complete parenting classes, get stable housing, demonstrate improvement. Then they'll return the child to them." "How long does that take?" 6 months minimum, maybe a year. And honestly, given what you've told me about this church, I'd expect them to comply. They'll do exactly what the court requires. On paper, they'll look like model parents. Barbara's hands clenched. "So what do I do?" David pulled out a legal pad. "We build a case. We document everything. We prove that even with compliance, these parents pose a fundamental danger to this child. But I need you to understand, this will be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally devastating. And we might lose. Then we fight anyway," Barbara said. David nodded. "Then let's start with what you know about this church." Barbara told him about the Church of the New Covenant, the isolation, the all-day services, the way Kyle controlled Tara, the way her daughter had changed from a vibrant music student to a silent, obedient shadow. And then Barbara told him about something she'd learned recently. A conversation her daughter had with a friend 3 years ago. A friend named Valerie Levin. David Kowalski hired a private investigator. Standard practice in high-stakes custody cases. He recommended Frank Morris, 53 years old, former Louisville Metro Police detective, now ran background checks and surveillance for family law attorneys. Frank's retainer, $3,500. His report came back in 4 days. Kyle Pashuk. Criminal record confirmed. Assault with a deadly weapon, 2009. Served 18 months in Warren County Detention Center. Released March 2011. No stable employment since 2012. Occasional cash work loading trucks at a warehouse. No tax returns filed since 2013. No bank accounts in his name. He operated entirely in cash. Tara Pashuk. No employment history since leaving Vanderbilt in 2014. No social media presence since 2016. All accounts deleted. No medical records. No credit cards. No driver's license renewal since 2015. She'd essentially disappeared from all official systems. Marriage license. Filed October 2015 at Warren County Courthouse. No wedding announcement. No photos. Just a signature on a form. And then the detail that made Barbara's stomach drop. Birth certificate application filed for Dmitry Michael Pashuk, March 26, 2018, 1 day after the child was discovered by police. Estimated date of birth listed as April 12, 2016. Age at time of application, approximately 23 months. 23 months old, and his birth had only been registered after he was found by authorities. For almost 2 years, Barbara's grandson had existed without any official record, no social security number, no vaccination records, no pediatric care, nothing. He was a ghost child. But Frank Morris found something else, something Barbara hadn't thought to look for. In July 2016, Kyle Pashuk had registered a vehicle. 2003 Ford Econoline van, white, purchased for $4,200 cash from a private seller in Glasgow, Kentucky. Frank had photos. He'd followed Kyle to services one Saturday, sat in his car with a telephoto lens and watched. The van had been parked outside a rural property 40 miles southeast of Bowling Green, just outside Scottsville, Kentucky. 27 acres of wooded land with a main house and 3 outbuildings. The property was registered to Samuel R. Malone, Pastor Malone. And according to Warren County property tax records, one of the outbuildings was listed as Church of the New Covenant Educational Facility. Educational facility. For a church with 30 members and no children, or so Barbara had thought. Frank Morris dug deeper into property records. The educational facility had been granted property tax exemption in 2014. Listed purpose: religious boarding school for children ages 2 to 16. Listed enrollment: 31 children. None of them had birth certificates registered with the state of Kentucky. David Kowalski filed the emergency custody petition on April 2, 2018, 8 days after Dmitri's discovery. 8 days that felt like 8 years. Mitchell v. Pashuk, Warren County Family Court. Case No. 2018 FC 00847. Petitioner Barbara Mitchell requests emergency temporary custody of minor child Dmitri Michael Pashuk, age 2, on grounds of severe neglect, abandonment, and imminent danger. Petitioner seeks immediate removal from parental custody and placement with maternal grandmother pending further proceedings. In emergency custody cases involving child endangerment, Kentucky law requires a hearing within 72 hours. The emergency hearing was scheduled for April 5, 2018, 3 days away. The emergency hearing lasted 47 minutes. Judge Patricia Lynn reviewed CPS reports, medical records from Dr. Kompenitz, police reports from Officer Thompson, photographs of the Pashuk home, the garbage, the filth, the bare mattress where Dmitri had been found. Kyle and Tara Pashuk sat with their court-appointed attorney, Marcus Webb. They said nothing, offered no defense. At 10:34 a.m., Judge Lynn made her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds imminent danger to the minor child if returned to parental custody. Emergency temporary custody is granted to petitioner Barbara Mitchell, effective immediately. Barbara felt her knees go weak. Robert steadied her. However, Judge Lynn continued, this is temporary custody only. For permanent custody determination, we'll need a full evidentiary hearing with witness testimony, expert evaluation, and thorough investigation. She looked at her calendar. That hearing is set for June 18, 2018, 10 weeks from today. Mr. Kowalski, Mr. Webb, use that time wisely. 10 weeks. 70 days to build a case so strong that no judge could send those boys back. David leaned over to Barbara. We won the first battle. Now comes the war. In the meantime, Dmitri moved from foster care into Barbara and Robert's home on Fieldstone Drive. April 6, 2018. A Saturday. Bright spring morning. He arrived with a CPS caseworker carrying a plastic bag. Everything the child owned fit in one grocery bag. 3 outfits, all too small, a donated stuffed animal, a folder of medical records. Barbara had prepared the guest bedroom. New bed, new sheets with dinosaurs, toys from Target, books, a nightlight shaped like the moon. Dmitri stood in the doorway staring. He'd never had his own room before. This is yours, Barbara said gently. Your room, your bed, your toys. He didn't respond, didn't move. It would take 3 weeks before he'd sleep in the bed. Until then, he slept on the floor in the corner. Old habits die hard. Within 48 hours of the emergency hearing, Judge Lynn appointed a guardian ad litem for Dmitri. In Kentucky, when custody is disputed and a child's welfare is at stake, the court must appoint an independent attorney, someone whose only client is the child. Not the grandmother, not the parents, the child. Margaret Rousseau, 51 years old, had been a guardian ad litem for 14 years. She'd handled over 200 cases. Custody disputes, abuse allegations, parental unfitness hearings. She'd seen it all. But this case bothered her from day one. A child with no birth certificate, no medical records, no evidence he'd existed until police kicked down a door. Parents who'd left him alone for 8 hours without food or water. Margaret's job was to investigate and make a recommendation to the court. Not what Barbara wanted. Not what Kyle and Tara wanted. What was best for Dmitri. She spent 2 weeks investigating. Margaret met Barbara and Robert at their home on Fieldstone Drive. The house was modest but immaculate. 3 bedrooms, small backyard with a swing set that looked recently assembled. Inside, clean, organized, comfortable. Photos on the walls, family photos, Barbara's students, Robert at company events. Dmitri was there, playing in the corner with blocks, still not talking, still wary. Margaret watched him for a moment, then turned to Barbara. "Tell me why you want custody." Barbara didn't hesitate. "Because he's my grandson, because he deserves a safe home, because his parents can't, or won't, take care of him. You're 52 years old, Mrs. Mitchell. Raising a traumatized toddler is exhausting. You could be looking at years of therapy, medical issues, behavioral problems. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes. You work full-time. We'll watch him during the day. I'm a teacher. I have summers off. During the school year, Robert's mother will watch him. She's 68, retired, lives 10 minutes away. And there's daycare if we need it. This will be expensive. Special needs therapy isn't cheap. We'll manage." Margaret made notes. "What about your daughter?" "Tara is his mother. Do you want her to have visitation?" Barbara's expression softened. Complicated emotions crossed her face. "I want my daughter to get help. Real help. Therapy. Freedom from Kyle's control. If she does that work, really does it, then yes, I want her in his life. But supervised, until she's stable." Margaret nodded. Good answer. Not vindictive. Protective, but not punishing. She spent 3 hours with them. Watched how Barbara interacted with Dmitri, patient, gentle, giving him space. Watched how Robert engaged, playful but not pushy. Saw how Dmitri gradually warmed to them. Small steps. Progress. 2 days later, Margaret drove to 847 Willow Bend Road, the Pasha house, where Dmitri had been found. Kyle and Tara weren't there. Both were staying elsewhere temporarily under CPS supervision. But Margaret had the warrant. She could inspect the property. The smell hit her first. Even 2 weeks later, even with windows open, the house reeked. Mildew, decay, something worse underneath. She walked through slowly, documented everything. Kitchen, spoiled food still on counters, garbage bags overflowing. Sink full of dishes with mold growing. Refrigerator mostly empty, condiments, expired milk, nothing substantial. Bathroom, toilet clogged, unusable. Shower stained. Medicine cabinet empty. No first aid supplies, no medications, nothing. Bedroom where Dmitri was found. Bare mattress on the floor. No sheets, no blankets, no toys. 1 window with a broken latch. Temperature in the room, 86 degrees. No air conditioning, poor ventilation. Margaret took 43 photographs. Measured rooms. Made detailed notes. This wasn't poverty. Plenty of poor families keep their homes clean, safe, functional. This was neglect. Deliberate or not, it was dangerous. Dmitri had spent his first week in emergency foster care before moving to Barbara's home. Margaret interviewed the foster parents, Rachel and Tom Henderson, experienced foster parents who'd cared for over 30 children in the past decade. How was he when he arrived? Margaret asked. Rachel Henderson's eyes filled with tears. He was the saddest child I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot. Sad how? He didn't cry. That was the worst part. 2-year-olds cry. They throw tantrums. They demand attention. Mitri did none of that. He just sat, stared at the wall, wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't eat unless we physically put food in his mouth. Did he speak? Not one word. We thought maybe he was deaf, but he responded to sounds. He just didn't speak. Tom added, it was like he'd learned that crying doesn't bring help. So he stopped trying. Margaret asked, did he improve at all during that week? Slightly. By day 5, he let Rachel hold him. Day 6, he ate a few bites on his own. Day 7, when Barbara Mitchell came to pick him up, he went to her without resistance. That's huge progress for a child this traumatized. Margaret reviewed Tara Pashuk's psychiatric evaluation from Rivendell Behavioral Health. Diagnosis: major depressive disorder, moderate. Post-traumatic stress disorder, dependent personality disorder with features of learned helplessness. Assessment: patient demonstrates classic signs of coercive control, long-term psychological manipulation by spouse Kyle Pashuk. Patient expresses genuine remorse for harm caused to children. Patient is currently not capable of independent parenting, but shows potential for improvement with intensive therapy. Recommendation: patient should not have unsupervised contact with minor children for minimum 12 to 18 months. Mandatory weekly therapy. Separation from spouse required. Patient may be suitable for supervised visitation after 6 months of consistent therapeutic progress. Margaret highlighted that section. Coercive control. It explained a lot. Margaret Rousseau spent 2 days writing her report. 31 pages, single-spaced, detailed. She submitted it to Judge Patricia Lynn on April 25, 2018. The conclusion: after thorough investigation including home inspections, interviews with all relevant parties, review of medical and psychological records, and observation of the minor child Mitri Pashuk, this guardian ad litem makes the following findings. Number 1. Parental unfitness. Biological parents Kyle and Tara Pashuk have demonstrated severe neglect, endangerment, and abandonment of minor child. The conditions in which the child was found constitute child abuse under Kentucky Statute CARA 600.020. Number 2. Maternal grandmother suitability. Barbara Mitchell and spouse Robert Mitchell are financially stable, emotionally capable, and genuinely committed to the child's welfare. Their home is safe, clean, and appropriate. They have demonstrated patience and understanding with the child's trauma-related behaviors. Number 3. Best interest of the child. It is this GAL's professional opinion that returning Mitri Pashuk to his biological parents, even with services and supervision, poses unacceptable risk to his physical and emotional well-being. Recommendation to the court. This guardian ad litem recommends permanent legal and physical custody be granted to maternal grandmother Barbara Mitchell and spouse Robert Mitchell, effective immediately. Furthermore, this GAL recommends biological mother Tara Pashuk be permitted supervised visitation only, contingent upon completion of mental health treatment and demonstration of stable independent living separate from spouse Kyle Pashuk. This GAL recommends biological father Kyle Pashuk's parental rights be terminated due to the severity of neglect and his continued refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing. Respectfully submitted, Margaret Rousseau, Esquire, guardian ad litem. David Kowalski called Barbara the day the report was filed. Margaret's recommendation is everything we hoped for, he said. The GAL report carries enormous weight with judges. Judge Lynn will read every word. Barbara felt relief wash over her, then immediately felt guilty for feeling relief. This was her daughter's child, her daughter's failure. But Mitri deserved safety, deserved love, deserved a childhood. What happens now? Barbara asked. Now we wait for June 18th, the full hearing. We present our case. They present theirs. Judge Lynn makes her final ruling. 8 more weeks. 8 more weeks of uncertainty, of temporary custody that could be revoked, of living in limbo. Barbara looked at Mitri, playing quietly on the living room floor. He'd started smiling. Small smiles. Rare, but real. 8 more weeks. Then he'd be theirs. Permanently. She hoped. Meanwhile, David Kowalski built their case. He subpoenaed medical records from Tristar Greenview, police reports from the welfare check, CPS assessments. He interviewed neighbors. Archibald Zemlin gave a detailed statement about the condition of the house and the parents' strange behavior. And then David tracked down Valerie Levine. Valerie Levine, 34 years old, professional violinist, lived in Nashville. She'd been Tara's friend at Vanderbilt. They'd studied together, practiced together, performed together. When Tara dropped out in 2014, Valerie had tried to stay in touch. It hadn't worked. David interviewed her via phone first, then drove to Nashville to take a formal statement. Tara changed completely after she met Kyle, Valerie told David. She stopped practicing, stopped going to classes. She'd show up to our practice rooms and just sit there, staring at the piano like she'd forgotten how to play. When did you last see her? February 2015. She showed up at my apartment. Unannounced. She looked scared. Scared how? Like someone was following her. She kept checking the door. Wouldn't sit down. She talked fast, rambling. She said she hated her life, but couldn't leave. Then she said something that didn't make sense at the time. David leaned forward. What did she say? She said, "I'm afraid they're going to take my son." I asked her, "Tara, you don't have a son." She stared at me. Then she said, "No, you're right. I don't." And she left. Did you believe her? Valerie paused. At the time, I thought she was confused. Maybe using drugs or having a breakdown. But looking back, I think she was pregnant, and I think she knew what was going to happen to the baby. David wrote quickly. Did she mention the church? Pastor Malone. She said she had to get back for evening prayers. That was it. I never saw her again. May 22, 2018. Warren County Family Court. Judge Patricia Lynn presiding. Judge Lynn, 48 years old, appointed to the bench in 2012, known for being thorough, fair, and deeply skeptical of religious justifications for child endangerment. She'd seen too many cases where faith became an excuse for abuse. The courtroom was small. Wood paneling from the 1970s, fluorescent lights that hummed, air conditioning that rattled but barely cooled. May in Kentucky meant humidity, and the courtroom felt like a sauna despite the struggling AC unit. Barbara and Robert sat in the front row on the left side. Behind them, Valerie Levine, who'd driven from Nashville to attend, Archibald Zemlin, Dr. Kompenitz. On the right side, Kyle and Tara Pashuk, sitting with their attorney Marcus Webb. Public defender, 39 years old, overworked and underpaid, handling 16 cases simultaneously. Kyle sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Tara's hands twisted in her lap, fingers nodding and unnodding. Judge Lynn entered at 9:02 a.m. Everyone stood. Be seated, Judge Lynn said briskly. We're here for emergency custody determination in the matter of Mitchell versus Pashuk. Mr. Kowalski, you may present your opening statement. David stood. Your Honor, this case involves severe and ongoing child neglect rooted in religious extremism. The petitioner, Mrs. Barbara Mitchell, seeks custody of her 2-year-old grandson who was found alone, malnourished and endangered. We will demonstrate that the parents are members of a fringe religious group that actively discourages proper child care, medical treatment, and basic safety standards. Judge Lynn made notes. Mr. Webb, your response. Marcus Webb stood, shuffling papers. Your Honor, my clients acknowledge that mistakes were made on March 25th. However, they are devoted parents who follow their sincere religious beliefs. They're willing to comply with any court-ordered services. We ask that the court pursue reunification rather than permanent custody removal. We'll see, Judge Lynn said neutrally. Mr. Kowalski, call your first witness. The petitioner calls Dr. Zina Kumpenitz. Dr. Kumpenitz took the stand at 9:17 a.m. She'd brought her full medical report, 12 pages documenting Mitri's condition when he arrived at the hospital. David approached with respectful efficiency. Dr. Kumpenitz, please describe the child's condition when you examined him on March 25th. The patient presented with severe malnutrition, dehydration, chronic bronchitis, pediculosis, that's head lice, multiple infected skin lesions, and significant developmental delays. His weight was 19 pounds, which places him in the 25th percentile for a 12-month-old child. For a 2-year-old, it's critical. Could you elaborate on the developmental delays? At age 2, children should be speaking in short sentences, walking steadily, beginning to run. This child was nonverbal. He couldn't stand without support. He didn't respond to his name, though we later learned his parents had never consistently used a name. He showed signs of reactive attachment disorder, common in children who've experienced severe neglect or institutional care. In your professional opinion, how long had this neglect been occurring? Based on the chronicity of his conditions, the malnutrition, the untreated infections, I'd estimate months, possibly since birth. Judge Lynn interrupted. Doctor, you mentioned the child didn't respond to his name. Had he been given a name? Not officially. The parents eventually told hospital staff his name was Mitri, but there was no birth certificate, no records. They seemed uncertain about his exact birth date. They said sometime in spring 2016, which is a 4-month range. The judge's expression darkened. Thank you. Continue, Mr. Kowalski. Dr. Kumpenitz, did the parents visit their son in the hospital? Rarely, maybe 3 times in the first month. The child's grandmother, Mrs. Mitchell, visited daily. She and her husband covered all medical expenses not covered by emergency Medicaid. How much were those expenses? Mitri spent 6 days in the hospital. Total bill, $43,700. Emergency Medicaid, activated by CPS, covered $31,200. Mrs. Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell paid the remaining $12,500. I was told they maxed out 2 credit cards and drained their savings account. But that was just the beginning. Physical therapy twice weekly, $180 per session after insurance. Speech therapy 3 times weekly, $220 per session. Occupational therapy, $195 per session. Pediatric specialist visits every 2 weeks, $95 copay. The first year alone cost them $23,400 in out-of-pocket medical expenses. David nodded. No further questions. Marcus Webb stood for cross-examination. Dr. Kumpenitz, is the child healthy now? Improving, with proper care. So the neglect wasn't permanent. The child can recover. Physically, possibly. Psychologically, the damage may be lasting. Reactive attachment disorder doesn't simply resolve. He'll need years of therapy. Webb sat down. He had nothing else. David's next witness surprised everyone. Brandon Morrison. Brandon Morrison, 37 years old, construction worker, recovering addict. He'd met Kyle Pashuk in county jail in 2009. Both were young, stupid, high. Kyle on methamphetamine, Brandon on heroin. They kept in touch after release. When Brandon overdosed in 2016 and nearly died, Kyle had visited him in the hospital, told him about the church, about redemption. Brandon attended services, got clean, stayed clean. He'd been sober for 2 years. He credited Kyle's church with saving his life, which made his testimony devastating. David called him to the stand at 10:42 a.m. Brandon walked up slowly, clearly uncomfortable. He wore clean work jeans, a button-down shirt, hands calloused from labor. "Mr. Morrison, how do you know the defendants?" "Kyle and I go way back. Since 2009. We were in jail together. You both served time for drug-related offenses." "Yes, sir." "Do you currently attend the Church of the New Covenant?" "Yes, sir, for 2 years now." "Have you been to Kyle and Tara Pashuk's home?" "Many times, for Bible study, prayer meetings." "Did you ever see their son, Mitri?" Brandon hesitated. Long pause. I heard him sometimes, crying in another room." "You heard him, but never saw him." "The adults met in the living room. Mitri was kept in the back bedroom." "For how long?" "During these meetings, usually 3 or 4 hours. And Mitri remained alone in the bedroom for the entire time." "Yes, sir." Judge Lynn leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, did that concern you? A toddler alone for 4 hours?" Brandon looked down. "I thought maybe he was sleeping. For 4 hours in the middle of the day." I don't know, ma'am." David continued. "Mr. Morrison, in all your visits to the Pashuk home, and you said many times, did you ever see Kyle or Tara feed their son, change his diaper, play with him?" "No, sir." "Never?" "No." The courtroom was silent. But David wasn't finished. He had one more question, the question that would crack this case wide open. "Mr. Morrison, are you aware of other children in your church?" Brandon's face went pale. I don't." "Simple question, Mr. Morrison. Are there other children associated with the Church of the New Covenant?" Long silence. Brandon looked at Kyle. Kyle's face remained expressionless, but his eyes burned with warning. "Yes," Brandon finally said. "How many?" "I don't know exactly. Approximately. Maybe 30, 35. 35 children." Judge Lynn's voice cut like steel. "Where are these children?" "At the facility. Pastor Malone's property." "And where do their parents live?" "Not there. The children live separately." David let that sit for a moment. "So approximately 35 children, ages ranging from infants to teenagers, live on Pastor Malone's property without their parents." "It's for spiritual education," Brandon said quickly. The parents agreed. "It's voluntary." "How old are these children when they're sent there?" "Different ages, some as young as 6 months." Judge Lynn stood abruptly. "We're taking a 15-minute recess. Mr. Kowalski, Mr. Webb, in my chambers." Now. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Barbara grabbed Robert's hand. "Did you hear that? 35 children." "Dear God," Robert whispered. In Judge Lynn's chambers, the conversation was tense. "Mr. Kowalski," Judge Lynn said, pacing, "did you know about this facility before today?" "We had intelligence suggesting it existed, Your Honor, but we didn't know the scope." "Mr. Webb, did your clients disclose this to you?" Marcus Webb looked genuinely shocked. "No, Your Honor. This is the first I'm hearing about other children." Judge Lynn picked up her phone. "I'm calling Child Protective Services and Kentucky State Police. If there are 35 children on that property, we need to know who they are, whether they're safe, and who their parents are." She made the call, spoke rapidly, authoritatively, hung up. "Hearing resumes in 10 minutes. I want both defendants on the stand, starting with Mrs. Pashuk." At 11:18 a.m., Tara Pashuk took the witness stand. She walked slowly, head down. Long denim skirt, loose blouse, hair in a severe bun. She looked like she might collapse. David approached carefully, his tone gentle but firm. "Mrs. Pashuk, thank you for testifying. I know this is difficult." Tara nodded silently. "How many children do you have?" Silence. "Mrs. Pashuk, I have a son. Mitri. Just Mitri. Just one son." Tara glanced at Kyle. He sat motionless, eyes locked on her. "Yes." David pulled out a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a sworn statement from witness Valerie Levine. In February 2015, Mrs. Pashuk told Ms. Levine, quote, 'I'm afraid they're going to take my son.' End quote." He turned back to Tara. "Mrs. Pashuk, in February 2015, you told your friend you were afraid someone would take your son. But according to your testimony, Mitri wasn't born until April 2016, over a year later. Can you explain that?" Tara's hands started shaking. "I was confused. I was pregnant. I was afraid." "Were you pregnant in February 2015? "I don't remember." "You don't remember if you were pregnant?" Tears started streaming down Tara's face. "I was confused." David stepped closer. Not threatening, just present. "Mrs. Pashuk, do you have another child?" "No." "Have you ever given birth to another child?" Tara looked at Kyle, then at the judge, then at her mother sitting in the front row. Barbara's eyes were full of tears, full of desperate hope. "Mrs. Pashuk," Judge Lynn said quietly, "this is a simple yes or no question. Have you given birth to more than one child?" The courtroom held its breath. Tara closed her eyes. Tears ran down her face. "Yes." The courtroom erupted. Judge Lynn banged her gavel 3 times. "Order. Order in this court." Barbara covered her mouth with both hands. Robert held her as she started to shake. Another child. Another grandson. Where was he? Judge Lynn's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone sit down and be quiet, or I'll clear this courtroom." The noise subsided. "Mrs. Pashuk," Judge Lynn said, her voice gentle now, "how many children have you given birth to?" "2." Barely a whisper. "2 sons?" "Yes." "What is your second son's name?" Tara sobbed. "I don't know." "You don't know his name?" They renamed him. At the compound. They said his worldly name didn't matter. He needed a name that honored God. "How old is he?" "Almost 3. "When did you last see him?" 2 years ago, when I took him there." "You took him to Pastor Malone's property?" "Yes." "How old was he?" Tara's voice broke. 8 months. The courtroom went silent, complete, horrified silence. Judge Lynn's face was carefully controlled, but her knuckles were white as she gripped her pen. "Mrs. Pashuk, you gave your 8-month-old infant to Pastor Malone, and you haven't seen him in 2 years. They said he needed to be raised in the community, away from the world, away from sin. Did you want to give him away?" "No." Tara sobbed harder. "No, but Pastor Malone said it was God's will. Kyle said it was our duty, that we were being selfish if we refused." "Where exactly is this child now?" "The children's building, the big one on the eastern side of the property." Barbara stood up without thinking. Tara, look at me." Judge Lynn didn't stop her. Tara looked at her mother, really looked at her, for the first time in 4 years. "Where is he?" Barbara's voice cracked. "What's the address?" 2847 Scottsville Cemetery Road, Tara whispered. "The compound. All the children are there." Judge Lynn stood. "This hearing is in recess. Bailiff, contact Child Protective Services immediately. And get me Kentucky State Police on the phone. Now." She turned to Kyle. "Mr. Pashuk, you are not to leave this courthouse. If you attempt to contact anyone, if you make a phone call, send a text, anything, I will hold you in contempt, and you will spend the night in jail. Am I clear?" Kyle stared at her, said nothing. "Am I clear, Mr. Pashuk?" "Yes." Judge Lynn looked at Tara. "Mrs. Pashuk, I'm ordering a psychiatric evaluation. You're to be transported to Rivendell Behavioral Health for assessment." She looked at Barbara. "Mrs. Mitchell, I know you want answers now, but law enforcement needs time to do this right. Be patient." Patience. Barbara had never been good at patience. For 6 days, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her grandson, the one she'd never met, alone on that compound. Did he know she existed? Did he remember his mother? Was he scared? Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the machinery of law enforcement ground forward. Deliberately, carefully. Day 1, May 22nd. Judge Lynn issued emergency orders. Kentucky State Police opened an investigation. FBI Child Exploitation Task Force was notified. Interstate trafficking concerns. Day 2, May 23rd. Detective Captain James Bradley assembled his team. 23 officers would be needed. This wasn't a simple welfare check. This was a potential mass rescue operation. Day 3, May 24th. Search warrant application filed. Probable cause. Testimony under oath indicating 33 children living in unlicensed facility without parental supervision, without birth certificates, without medical care. Day 4, May 25th. Warrant approved by Circuit Court Judge Marion Humphreys. Scope: entire property, all buildings, all vehicles, all persons present. Authority to remove endangered minors. Day 5, May 26th. Logistics planning. Kentucky State Police, Warren County Sheriff, Child Protective Services, Department of Social Services, Emergency Medical Services. Everyone needed to coordinate. Who goes where? How to minimize trauma to children. Where to transport 30-plus kids if needed. Day 6, May 27th. Final briefing. Aerial surveillance via helicopter to map the property. Confirm number of buildings. Identify exits. Plan for contingencies. What if someone runs? What if there's resistance? What if some of the adults are armed? Barbara knew none of this at the time. She only knew she was going insane waiting. On May 27th, David Kowalski called her. "Tomorrow morning," he said. 6 a.m. Kentucky State Police is moving on the compound. Can I be there? No, absolutely not. This is a law enforcement operation, but I'll call you the second I know anything. Barbara didn't sleep that night. May 28, 2018. Tuesday, 6:47 a.m. 23 Kentucky State Police officers, 6 Child Protective Services workers, 3 emergency medical technicians, 2 prosecutors from the Warren County District Attorney's Office, 1 helicopter for aerial surveillance and coordination. They assembled 2 miles from the property at 6:15 a.m. Captain James Bradley reviewed the plan one final time. "Our priority is the children," he told his team. "We go in calm, we go in professional. These kids have been through enough. We're not here to terrify them. We're here to save them." At 6:47 a.m., the convoy rolled out. They arrived at 2847 Scottsville Cemetery Road at 6:53 a.m. The compound looked almost peaceful from the road. Main house, well-maintained. White vinyl siding, black shutters. 3 large outbuildings behind it. Metal-sided structures that could have been barns or storage facilities. Wooded acreage stretching back into the hills. A few vehicles parked near the main house. 2 pickup trucks, a 15-passenger van, Kyle's white Ford Econoline. No children visible. No sounds. Early morning quiet. Captain Bradley approached the main house with 4 officers. The rest of the team positioned themselves around the property perimeter. He knocked. Firm. Official. 15 seconds. No answer. He knocked again. Kentucky State Police. We have a warrant to search this property. The door opened. Pastor Samuel Malone stood there, 57 years old, gray beard neatly trimmed, wearing khaki pants and a button-down shirt. Calm expression, almost serene. "Good morning, officers," he said pleasantly. "How can I help you?" Captain Bradley held up the warrant. "We have a warrant to search this property. We have reason to believe there are minors present without proper supervision, documentation, or legal authority." Pastor Malone smiled. A gentle, benevolent smile. The smile of a man who had nothing to hide. "Of course, officer. We have nothing to hide here. We're serving God. Doing His work. You're welcome to look around." He stepped aside. Gestured them in like a host welcoming dinner guests. What they found inside made national news. 33 children. Ages 18 months to 16 years. They lived in 2 large dormitory-style buildings, one for boys, one for girls. A third building housed infants and toddlers, ages 18 months to 4 years. The conditions weren't overtly abusive. Clean, organized. Children were fed basic meals of rice, beans, vegetables, occasional chicken. They attended classes, Bible study, manual labor in the garden, more Bible study. But there were no birth certificates, no school enrollment records, no medical files, no vaccination records. Many of the children couldn't name their parents. The younger ones, those brought to the compound as infants, had never known life outside this place. They'd been raised by community elders, members of Pastor Malone's church assigned to oversee them. Rotating shifts. No one adult formed lasting bonds with any child. Attachment was discouraged. Worldly attachment is sin, Pastor Malone told officers calmly. We're preparing these children for the kingdom of God, not the kingdom of man. Captain Bradley found records in Pastor Malone's office. A ledger, handwritten entries dating back to 2012. Each entry listed a child's arrival date, estimated age, and a new name assigned by the church. Parents' names were recorded, but crossed out. Relinquished to the community for proper raising. One entry, dated September 2015. Male infant, 8 months. Arrival date, September 14, 2015. Birth parents, T. Pashuk and K. Pashuk. Assigned name, Samuel, for our founding pastor. Child will be raised in righteousness. Barbara's grandson, Tara's first son. He'd been there for 2 years and 8 months. Pastor Samuel Malone was arrested on site, charged with 33 counts of child endangerment, operating an unlicensed child care facility, and contributing to the delinquency of minors. Additional charges would come later: conspiracy, fraud, unlawful restraint. Over the following week, 32 parents were identified and located. 18 were arrested and charged with child abandonment and neglect. Kyle Pashuk was arrested at the courthouse, charged with 2 counts of child neglect, 1 count of child abandonment, and 1 count of conspiracy. Tara Pashuk was not arrested. Judge Lynn ordered psychiatric evaluation instead. The evaluation concluded Tara had been under coercive control, a psychological condition where one person uses fear, manipulation, and isolation to dominate another. Kyle had controlled her completely for 4 years. The children were placed with relatives where possible. 13 went to grandparents, 8 to aunts or uncles. 12 went into foster care. No family could be located or deemed suitable. And 2, Mitri and Samuel, went home with Barbara and Robert Mitchell. The final custody hearing was held June 12, 2018, 3 weeks after the raid. This time, the courtroom was different. Tara sat alone. Kyle was in jail awaiting trial. Marcus Webb was gone, replaced by a criminal defense attorney handling Kyle's case. Tara had no lawyer. She'd waived her right to one. Barbara and Robert sat in the front row, David Kowalski beside them. Judge Lynn entered. Everyone stood. "Be seated. We're here to determine permanent custody of minor children, Mitri Michael Pashuk and Samuel." She paused. "The child currently known as Samuel, whose legal name is pending determination." She looked at Tara. "Mrs. Pashuk, you've indicated you wish to make a statement." Tara stood, voice shaking but clear. "Your Honor, I want my sons to go to my mother." Barbara closed her eyes, tears streaming. "I'm not fit to be a mother right now," Tara continued. "I don't know if I ever will be. But my mother is. She's strong. She's good. She'll take care of them. They deserve that." "Mrs. Pashuk, do you understand this decision is permanent? I'll grant you visitation rights if you complete therapy and parenting classes, but your mother will have full custody. You won't be able to change your mind later. I understand. You're voluntarily relinquishing your parental authority." "Yes." Judge Lynn looked at Barbara. "Mrs. Mitchell, do you accept full custody of these children?" Barbara stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you understand the responsibilities, the financial burden? These children will need therapy, medical care, possibly years of treatment for trauma." "I understand. We're ready." Judge Lynn nodded, wrote for a long moment. "In the matter of Mitchell versus Pashuk, this court finds clear and convincing evidence of severe neglect, abandonment, and endangerment of minor children, Mitri Pashuk and Samuel Pashuk. Accordingly, this court grants full legal and physical custody of both children to petitioner Barbara Mitchell and her spouse Robert Mitchell, effective immediately. Furthermore, I'm recommending criminal charges against Kyle Pashuk for child abandonment and neglect. Mrs. Pashuk, given your cooperation and evidence of coercive control, I'm recommending probation with mandatory therapy rather than jail time." Tara nodded through her tears. "Thank you, Your Honor." Mr. Pashuk is remanded to custody pending criminal trial. This hearing is adjourned. Judge Lynn stood. Everyone stood. As the bailiff led Kyle out in handcuffs, he looked back at Tara. One last time. She didn't look back. October 2019, 18 months after the custody hearing. The house on Fieldstone Drive in Bowling Green looked different. Bigger swing set in the backyard. Sandbox. Toys scattered on the porch. The sound of children laughing. Real laughter. The kind that comes from joy, not fear. Mitri was almost 4 years old now. Small for his age, but growing. He called Barbara and Robert Grandma and Grandpa, and he talked constantly. Questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do squirrels sleep? Can I have another cookie? Normal questions, beautiful questions. Samuel was 5 years old. Quieter than his brother. More cautious, but he smiled now. Laughed, played. He'd started kindergarten at Lincoln Elementary, the same school where Barbara taught. He loved books, loved drawing, loved making friends. He was learning what it meant to be a child. Every Tuesday afternoon, Tara visited. Supervised at first, then gradually unsupervised as she completed her therapy requirements. At first, the boys didn't know who she was. Samuel had no memory of her. He'd been 8 months old when she gave him away. Mitri remembered only fear and hunger. But slowly, carefully, they were building something new. Tara had divorced Kyle in December 2018. She'd moved to a small apartment in Bowling Green, worked part-time at the public library. She was taking online college classes, music education, slowly rebuilding what she'd lost. She'd never gone back to the church. She testified against Pastor Malone at his trial. Her testimony helped convict him. One Tuesday, after the boys had gone outside to play, Tara sat with Barbara at the kitchen table. Same table where Barbara had served countless family dinners. Same table where Tara had practiced piano theory as a child. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself," Tara said quietly. Barbara didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't okay. What happened to those boys, what happened to all 33 children, would never be okay. But Barbara told her the truth. "You're doing the work, Tara. You're showing up. That's what matters now. Not erasing the past, but building something better." Tara cried. Barbara held her hand across the table. Some bonds break, some heal, some do both. The legal costs totaled $118,400. David Kowalski's fees, $87,000 over 18 months. His retainer alone had been $15,000. Then came hourly billing, $325 per hour for court appearances, depositions, document preparation, phone calls. Discovery alone cost $23,000. Trial preparation, $18,000. Court appearances, $31,000. Private investigator Frank Morris, $8,500. Background checks, surveillance, photographic evidence, witness interviews, expert witnesses and evaluations, $12,300. Dr. Kompenitz's testimony preparation, $2,800. Psychiatric evaluations for Tara, $4,200. Guardian ad litem fees, $5,300. Court fees, filing costs, document preparation, service of process, $10,600. Barbara and Robert had taken out a home equity loan against their paid-off $185,000 house. Loan amount, $125,000 at 6.2% interest over 20 years. Monthly payment, $897. Over 20 years, they'd pay back $215,280, nearly double what they borrowed. The interest alone would cost them $90,280. Robert had done the math on their kitchen table one night. Showed Barbara the numbers. "We'll be 72 years old when this is paid off," he'd said quietly. Barbara looked at him. "And the boys will be 22 and 23, college age, starting their lives." Robert nodded. "Worth it. Worth every penny." Pastor Samuel Malone was convicted on 14 counts of child endangerment and unlicensed operation of a care facility. Sentenced to 12 years in Kentucky State Penitentiary. Eligible for parole in 8. Kyle Pashuk was convicted on 2 counts of child neglect and 1 count of child abandonment. Sentenced to 6 years. He'd be eligible for parole in 4. Tara Pashuk received 5 years probation with mandatory therapy and parenting classes. She completed both. In November 2020, Judge Lynn granted her unsupervised visitation rights. Of the 32 other parents involved in the compound, 18 were charged. 12 were convicted. Sentences ranged from probation to 8 years in prison. The children were healing, most placed with family, some in loving foster homes, all receiving therapy, medical care, education. Mitri started pre-K. He loved dinosaurs, wanted to be a paleontologist. Samuel started first grade. He wanted to learn piano. Barbara was teaching him, gently. No pressure, just music, just joy. Maybe he'd play Chopin someday. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, he'd be free to choose. This case made national news. It led to changes in Kentucky law. Stricter oversight of religious educational facilities, mandatory registration of homeschooled children, increased penalties for child abandonment. But laws can't fix everything. Sometimes it takes a grandmother knocking on a door, a neighbor who pays attention, a police officer who acts fast. Sometimes it takes someone refusing to give up, refusing to walk away, refusing to accept that a closed door means the conversation is over. Barbara Mitchell could have walked away, could have said, "My daughter made her choice." She didn't. She knocked. She called police. She fought in court. She spent $118,400 she didn't really have. She opened her home and her life to two traumatized children who didn't know how to trust. And because she did that, two boys have a future. If you're watching this because you're worried about someone, a child, a sibling, a friend, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore it. Don't wait. Make the call. Knock on the door. If they won't open it, call the police. Break it down if you have to. You might save a life. Leave a comment below. Tell us where you're from. If you face something similar, you're not alone. There's a community here. If you suspect a child is being neglected or abused, call your local child protective services or call 911. Make the call. Don't assume someone else will. Hit that subscribe